I think well over half of all trades are like done automatically
Right.
finished by algorithms, right?
Right.
Well, comfortable with that. Of course, it may be why we end up with like, market crashes that we sometimes don't understand, or they could be exacerbated potentially, right?
Right.
Uh, but equally, there are a lot of people who think that agents doing things online will be well over half the web traffic very quickly in like 2 to 3 years from now.
Sure.
So, we could get there even faster.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Deep Learning with PolyAI, the only podcast that successfully cooked a 22-pound Thanksgiving turkey a week ahead of time. Well, I'm just kind of bragging for myself because I
Oh,
did have a Friendsgiving this past
no
weekend.
worries. We have a bigger one coming up, or
No, I'm done. I did. It's a one and done thing for us. We go elsewhere for the old Thanksgiving feast. But what about you, Nicola? Do you celebrate the American holidays at all over in the UK?
my wife was born in the U.S., so we have like a healthy amount of like U.S. cultural exposure. Plus, like I tend to work predominantly with Americans. It is awesome because my calendar looks like someone nuked it. Right, there's nothing in it, so I am very, very looking forward to Thanksgiving. And unlike you, I don't have to cook a turkey or anything.
Fun.
Maybe I'll do a real one.
Yeah, why not? Why not? Well, I'm glad that you're thankful for an empty calendar, and that's
I am
wonderful to hear.
for an empty calendar finally. Yeah.
Well, we'll send you and everyone who's listening or watching into the holidays on a good note. Actually, they'll probably be seeing this when they get back, so hopefully you're nice and full. Maybe you've notched a little bit up on the belt, but you're coming back and ready to learn about what everyone is talking about, I guess, within the industry, which is this concept of agentic AI. Agentic AI. So that's today's theme. Nicola, when you initially hear agentic AI, how do you feel?
Well, I mean, I think we're just like adding new terms to like explain something that we all kind of like already understand, right? I think it's kind of like allowing yourself to think about like, just like what you'll be able to do with LLMs going forward, right? So it's like a big umbrella term for like things that will actually take actions in the world, that will take sequential things, that will call other things, that will have these like chains of, like calling other software, other agents to do things on their behalf, doing things in parallel, doing things in the background. It's really like an excuse to let your imagination run loose, right? And let me stop at that poetic thing. How do you see it?
I mean, yeah, to me, it's funny because we're obviously in the industry and we see, or the concept is that we're producing, voice assistants that are essentially virtual agents, what other people refer to. But the agent in agentic AI is referring to agency, is referring to a step towards more autonomy. So less human input into this new wave of artificial intelligence and more capability to act unto itself, right? So
Yep.
traditional AI is about computation. It's about probabilistic outcomes, right? Generative AI is about actually creating something. Agentic AI to me is, all right, now let's act. Instead of
Yep.
just creating output, let's act on this. And so it's my understanding that agentic AI sort of started on an individual consumer level, right? Having artificial intelligence represent me and my actions, going out booking airline tickets for me, setting reservations for me, et cetera. But obviously, there's a lot of corporate applications to this as well. What do you see that as being the migration of this concept of agentic AI? Is how can we take this representation of an individual and sort of a technological butler and putting it in the corporate sphere?
So I think like, there are many definitions, and people say that it's like, kind of like AI that can act autonomously, that can, perform things independently. I think that um, it really is defined in contrast with the kind of like co-pilot approach and the assistive approach, where AI is there to kind of like help you be better, to, find things more easily, or inform your actions as opposed to performing actions on your behalf, right? I think in that sense, what we've always done as voice agents, right? Things that, with every enterprise client, we look at how we can do work on behalf of, not on behalf of the agent, but instead of the agent, right? Like make reservations, make appointments, redeliver things, change your account details, like navigate your subscriptions, like update them, right? So all that stuff has always been about like what we today call agentic, right? Um, the copilot piece is where like I think a lot of like PR went first, right? So I think this sure. The second piece, of course, is like the whole thing around like can they improve themselves, etc. That's overloaded and doesn't have a clear definition either, right? Like,
Is that a necessary function of what people consider agentic AI is the ability to self-improve?
well, I don't know. I mean, like I think if you Google it in three different ways, you'll see
Yeah, true.
missions, right? So, people talk about that. They talk about like productivity. They call about, there's a lot of stuff, right? So, no, I don't think it's a requirement. I think like, one thing that was always kind of like something you could imagine as like, something that runs in the background and performs many actions
Mhm.
while, you know, it does the work. It's like, it has agency in their life. I'm like, plan a holiday for my family and then book it and put it in the calendar and move my other
Right.
things and book holiday, perform like an ordered sequence of actions, right? And potentially, call a lot of APIs, figure out how to do things. Um, it really isn't, I think, strictly defined, right? It is about just kind of like doing work, doing a lot of work, like potentially something that's not like click, here's a response, or click, action
Right.
is, but something that might go and like be a workhorse, right? And that kind of like you're imagining this like high-powered sidekick that maybe emerges occasionally to clarify something, but other than that, it's like an autonomous entity doing work on
Right.
your behalf for doing
Going to your example though of like planning a trip. So right now people are who are just getting acclimated to the concept of generative AI and LLMs out there assisting with, taking a step above doing basic search, right? So I search, tell me all about like Turin. Okay, here's some information. Okay. Now, right now, people are going to the GPTs of the world and they're saying, how about you tell, or I guess they're dropping GPT right now. It's just chat, right? Okay. So they're going to these LLMs and saying, plan an itinerary for me. Here are
Yep.
my interests. And then you get some text-based output. Now it's, to your point, tell me about my interests and then also start booking like travel, start booking
Well,
tours.
or even plan an itinerary for, like a trip that might cost under £3,000 for two adults and two kids.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I'd like it to be, like in the south of Spain or Greece, and I'd like it to be, I don't know, all inclusive because I have two small kids and we can't really like autonomously. We can't be very agentic ourselves right? Anymore. We're vassal states to the kids. So it's that thing might go check the prices, right? Not just like general prices based on like
True. Okay.
or not. But like, hey, I found this. Like, would you like me to make the booking? Here's a proposal. Hit yes, right? And or you then go like, no, don't do that place. I've been there, but I like this thing in Greece. Like, tell me about that and that, and maybe check flights, check which days I might have to. Can I like tweak dates a little to save money?
Hmm.
Like, can I fly out on a Sunday instead of a Saturday and like take an extra day of holiday here, right? Like and then that thing could go and just like query a lot. And that was always the dream of like the superhuman piece of it, right? You know how hard it is when you're looking or this, that, this, that, and you're tired, you look annoyed. Did you look enough or did you just end up like booking or did you really optimize it? Who knows, right? Because it's often it's a, there's a Cartesian product to the whole thing. Like, when do you fly? What are the accommodation dates?
Right.
You kind of need to go and start making a spreadsheet, right? Which you may or may not do. So this thing should be able to just like present you with those choices, and then you're going, oh, well, this one, right?
It seems like it alleviates that analysis paralysis that you get, which is that when you're inundated with different options that traditional like output from LLMs is going to give you, now you can just say, look, do it and then book it because you're making things more stressful by giving me too many things to look at. And I need to now take the perfect itinerary and put it in action or something.
Well, yeah, in general, like if you know that you can like change the dates and check, and then you're looking at like, you may have different like thresholds. Like you like to fly with, I don't know, United, but like maybe you're willing to not get those points if it's $500 less, right?
Yeah,
So
sure.
could just be like even different options with like one world versus like Star Alliance things, or just check it
Right.
all for me mindlessly. Like go check it all. Your AI, you have time, right? Um, it comes back to like, potentially very strong ROI, right? We'll ignore the cost of compute.
So we, yeah, seriously.
And in Brazil has evaporated as you try to save those two words, but
Yeah. He just burned 3 grand and took out 17 acres of rainforest. Um, Okay, so we see the personal application. Obviously, there's a lot of application as well for this concept, this general principle, and these aggressive models that are sort of working toward that end goal within within the enterprise space. The thing that always strikes me though is that we as individuals are a little more willing to absorb risk when we're, evaluating different flight plans or whatever. And, we're putting in prompts and we're kind of refining results accordingly. Then it's willing to take the act. But we're still in a society and sort of a global economy that is walking towards generative AI a little hesitantly. There's been broader acceptance, but there's still the question of risk. Why are enterprises investigating this, what I would call next evolution of generative AI, when they're already a little hesitant on simply getting input or providing output from generative AI to either customer base or internally to improve operations? Now they're basically saying, okay, we're not only willing to do that, but let them act on our behalf as well. It seems a little cart before the horse for me. What's your opinion on that?
I think the expectations and risk appetites are still settling. Like, I think there's a huge variance of them. I think you'd see a lot more risk appetite if we saw more of these, kind of like attempts come to fruition a bit more quickly. Um, I don't think that there are like companies that are like willing to let it do all this and then like basic things. Like there is, I think, a funnel, right? Where there are fewer and fewer that will allow it to kind of like run amok and make these decisions. It doesn't mean that it's making decisions if it's agentic. It might mean that it's just performing a more complex set of actions to help someone do something, right? I think at the end of the day, it's a business process that where you're deciding whether something works or not. And I think, like with any other technology, you're going to have to test and, be like thoughtful around how you've evaluated it, when you continue to use it and where you don't. I mean, think of all the hedge funds using like algorithms for trading, right?
True.
That's agentic, right? It may not have been, LLM powered agentic stuff. It may be powered with far more sophisticated machine learning model, right?
Yeah.
That does mathematics that is a lot more complicated than what an LLM does for now. That's okay, right? Like, I mean, we use these systems, right? Like, and we just have like ways, we have like off ramps that say, if this starts happening, we'll stop, right? And you have continuous measures around like, is it producing value, right? Are we, like, what's the P&L for the day, right? Where do you like stop trading, right? Similarly, I think, if this thing is like doing part of the work that humans, well, you'll be measuring just like, I don't know, if it's these reservations and things. I'm no expert on that, but like, you'd probably be looking at like, just has something changed drastically? If it has, maybe there's a bug that you haven't planned for.
Right. Would you say that going back to you commenting on, agentic is just sort of a bit of a buzzword, is a little PR at work. I mean, would you consider APIs to be a rudimentary form of agentic action?
AI is absolutely like agentic in that, it's
So this has been happening all the time. It's just all of a sudden, maybe it's the LLM poweredness behind it that just
I think
accentuates.
one thing that is exciting that gets like I think a lot of people excited is, you saw an LLM and its ability to just like it has consumed like all information that it could get its hands on, right? Like, it can probably tell you quite effectively about you and me, no problem, right?
Right.
Tell you, the extended history of your town, like everything in it, and maybe well-known like hotels and landmarks. It will just know things, right? But what if it could, and this was like the first thing, kind of like when 3.5 kind of like in public perception became what it was, you had people like doing these API things where, they would instruct the LLM to kind of like return the bits of information it doesn't know about so that you make a function call, you go to Google, you pull down some information, you reinsert it into the prompt, and you return it that way, right? Now we have that like kind of like inbuilt with like searching, summarizing, etc. Um, but I think that was the first like outlet of like what we kind of hope, or I don't know if we hope, to some extent, we hope and anticipate that it becomes this AGI, like, you
Right.
know, in a way, a pseudo conscious thing that can like continue to exist. It has consciousness and continues to interact with the world, right? For it to interact with the world, it has to be agentic and that it has to have these ways of interacting with the world. It has to be able to at least like search the internet and read things on the internet. It should be able to call API calls and, potentially interact with other LLMs, right? So that it can go and just like do a lot more and maybe learn from those actions, right? And like get continuous feedback from the world around those actions. If I let that system be like a control system for temperature. I've been in this room boiling all day, right? After from the party, right? And like, that thing could, observe that from certain things if it was the controller and go like, okay, like if I increase the temperature, Nicola's, heart rate and general health, I don't know, if I had like an Apple Watch or whatever. Like,
Sure.
oh, something's off. What if I like cool him up? So I could experiment, right? Like I could do all sorts of things to make my life better, right? That's a bit of an abstract example, right? But
Well, we're also, I mean, I think that also gets to the application of when we see sort of AI represented in a negative fashion in modern pop culture, it's a lot of increased agency leads to over abuse of power, right? So there's been horror movies that have come out that have shown like what happens when AI gets too presumptive. And of course, even throwing back to the ultimate Skynet like singularity. Um, I think that there's easily something that is triggered in the individual's mind when it comes to, I'll use you as an information resource. I'll use you as an ability to endure massive amounts of compute to give me answers that are helpful for me. But am I going to let you start making decisions on my behalf? So it seems like the autonomous aspect is both welcome and interesting and stokes a lot of like interest and curiosity, but it's also a massive trigger when it comes to how much do we let these systems act on our behalf. You did mention about how this was like steps towards AGI. And
yeah,
so it seems like that's the natural progression. Where do we see it, you know, f- forgoing risk with regards to enterprise adoption? Where do we see that the desire to to capitalize on AI's ability to act in an agentic application? Risk aside, is this something that you think ultimately drives more benefit than that added risk? Well, maybe not risk aside, but risk in mind. Do you think it drives added benefit for standard enterprise operations where it could be applied?
of course. I mean, let's look. It's when you think of agentic behavior, right? Like what you would want to think is that there's one thing thinking about like your request, right? And kind of like what do you as a say you asked about something, right? And then maybe like, the second AI is there to kind of like, not demand APIs, but instead take over the screen and like go through like the pages that a human would click through, etc. Right? Right. I think that's what a lot of people imagine, right? And by the way, that thing then would not be like, an API might not be instant either, right? Because they're waiting, making progress, learning, right? Maybe it can like clone itself 1,000 times and do the work 1,000 times in parallel. Like that's something that a human cannot do, right? That's how you can get your 1,000 quotes, look at all of them and come back, right? Maybe even if you don't have an API to do it, right? Like it is able to just do these things and come back to you, right? With like the best solution, right? Like it could do work on your behalf that would take a human, like let's say it was getting 1,000 quotes, like and each quote took a human 2 minutes to work. So a lot of quick click go through some
Right.
like look at it, put it in an Excel spreadsheet. This thing would just do it all at once, right? And maybe without any extra APIs, right? Maybe it's just there, kind of like RPA companies, like controlling the mouse and going and like doing the work, right? That would save companies a lot of money in that digital transformation, right? So rather than having to, potentially, and by the way, like if it's of sufficient, capability, it should be able maybe to over time like write that API and go, look, I don't want to click that 1,000 times. Like I'm gonna go and see, all right, where's the architecture? I'm gonna say, realize that this I need this function here. I might send an email to another agent who's like a proxy for like a software architect in that in the other part of the company has clear authority to give me access to this or that, right? Like I'll ask them to produce like, you know, like to open a certain port and a certain IP address. And if it's and like an HTTPS request of this kind with this like key, like, it can send me all that back, right? And maybe
Right.
that it goes like, huh, Roger that. Okay. I'll go and check, right? And, your agent like goes, snoozes, whatever, waits for it, right? The other thing might surface into a human file approval, right? Say, hey, I'm okay to open like to this kind of function, that port, that request from this. You might even have like two humans that in the background going like, hey, Mike,
Right.
like, did you
Autonomy, but not that much.
yeah,
Autonomy, oh, with
did you
limits.
grasp for this? Like, is this something? Yeah, it's native broad, that should be explained. They go, okay, okay, yes. It says yes to its agent, right? And then it's like, okay, well, like, the two phone operators put them through, write some technology, do that or more. Because, I remember the first time we had Google Duplex call one of our assistants, right? And they had a clumsy conversation about opening hours of a pub in the UK. Um, it was like 2020. It was hilarious. We still get those calls happening daily, right? Because that's what they update Google Maps opening times. And it was like two AIs were speaking clumsy human language. Like ours has gotten a lot better. I think theirs might have gotten a bit better. I don't know. But that's agentic, right? Like we
Right.
had their agent calling the agent of this thing. Both with delegated work. One agent was delegated work that said, hey, like pick up the phone, help people out. The other one was like, hey, here's a list of restaurants, go call them, right? And these two agents were interacting and doing the work and like publishing results online. Like, isn't that amazing?
It is. And that
Like, it's part of
observing.
yeah, like you get this question all the time, right? And then they ask if it's like a two-part thing, if there's a break in the middle, can they deliver things in the middle? We surface that to the client and like they can change their response so that the next time this agent calls, the information is changed,
Sure.
you know? It's
There is something that's particularly interesting around the observability of agentic AI interactions, especially like, two-way agentic interactions. Because as we talked about earlier, this has been happening all the time, sort of behind the scenes,
well,
how
I'm thinking about trade, right? Like I think well over half of all trades are like done automatically
right,
finished by algorithms, right?
right.
We're comfortable with that, like when it comes to like global economy and stability and everything. Like we should be comfortable with a lot of other things. Now, of course, it may be why we end up with like, market crashes that we sometimes don't understand, or they could be exacerbated potentially, right?
Right.
Uh, but equally, like, you know, there are a lot of people who think that agents doing things online will be well over half the web traffic very quickly in like 2 to 3 years from now.
Sure.
So, we could get there even faster, right? As long as we find good use cases where it makes sense to parallel that compute. Or,
Well, the writing was on the wall leading up to this. I mean, go to your local grocery store, and half the people that are in the aisles are shopping on behalf of others who have booked them through an app. So again, observable, agentic, non-AI, but still agentic nonetheless. We're moving to an agentic economy, and the market is responding, right? As a matter of fact, some former just reported today, I think, or yesterday, that dev slash agents, which is a startup that was founded by some ex-Meta, Google, Stripe execs, just came out with a $56 million seed round raise. It's an OS for agentic AI. So is that going to be the next big wave of startups, are companies that are basically creating products for agentic AI?
I mean, like, definitely. I mean, as you said, I think like the naming shifts has been happening all along, right? Um, can't comment on that one. I don't know much about it, but yeah, it's
Not that particular one, but just in general, is it in the steps towards AGI and how
so much what we have like, agreed architectures and standards on the internet. I think we'll have them in, the internet post like an AI first world, right?
yeah, true. All right, no, that makes a ton of sense. Interesting. Any other like final comments, thoughts on the future of agentic AI, or where is this just again another step towards the ultimate end goal of AI first world placement? But
I don't know. I mean, look, I think like let's go build some cool shit and see where we end up, right?
this is the best way to outro. All right, cool. Nikola, appreciate your time. This is good stuff. I will be looking at every single piece of automation that I have around me, whether in the, sort of behind the scenes operationally or in front of me, observable agentic AI, as we were talking about, um, with a
Well,
whole new,
good luck going about your agentic day, man.
same to you. And for the rest of you, we'll talk to you next week. Thanks, Nikola. Take care.
Cheers. Bye.